What's up everyone, Alex here. When it comes to Square Enix, a lot of mainstream RPG fans are only able to see the Final Fantasy series, and not the other wonderful games that the company's made over the years. It is where the heart and soul of Square Enix turn-based games can be found, and one doesn't need to look hard to see that they've made a bunch of them over the past 5 years. And they're not all remasters and remakes either. So I decided to rank 10 of my favorite Square Enix games and series, I know that's cheating, so that players who've only had turn-based experiences with Final Fantasy can experience brand new worlds, and some familiar ones thrown in for good measure. While I share my list, I want you to share what yours looks like, since I skipped a few games here and there. I know some of these games are still in your backlog, so I'm hoping that by talking about these, that it'll encourage you to start playing them. Let's begin. Yasumi Matsuno coming back to completely rebalance and hit the reset button on Tactics Ogre systems was certainly not in my bingo card for 2022, but that's exactly what we got. Tactics Ogre Reborn feels like a completely different game after all of these changes, and while the jury's still out as many longtime fans examine, dissect, and master its systems since this game's release, it can't be denied that there was so much care and effort put into this that they couldn't even figure out whether to call it a remake or a remaster. Some of us would like to think that Tactics Ogre Reborn is the appetizer to the main dish that is the long-rumored Final Fantasy Tactics remake. But even if that game doesn't materialize for another few years, the gameplay and the political unrest you'll embroil yourself in Tactics Ogre Reborn gives you a glimpse of what might be. Tomoya Asano's Bravely Default single-handedly convinced Square Enix to increase the development of turn-based games. So much so that he was given his own production team and the ability to make 2 brand new franchises and remake a beloved trilogy, both of which you'll see represented here. So it's fitting then that after striking gold with Octopath Traveler, that Team Asano would return to their roots and make a modern sequel to Bravely Default called Bravely Default 2. Not to be confused with Bravely Second and Layer, which is a direct sequel of the original, Bravely Default 2 marks the first time the series has been released on home console. This allowed its makers to render its stylized graphics in even more extravagant fashion, taking full advantage of the Switch's hardware while still letting fans play it on the go, which I feel is a must these days if you want to play lengthy RPGs. And who can forget its incredible job system, which takes a classic formula and puts a spin on it that's uniquely its own. Bravely Default 2 is a trip back to a simpler time, but it's also one of the best games featuring the job system ever made. A lot of people dismissed Voice of Cards because it felt more like a Western RPG than anything else, and I can see the confusion out there too, so let me describe what this really is. This is an RPG series produced by Nier's Yoko Taro, with each game playing around with the Japanese-style turn-based battle concept and injecting new elements with every game. And while it might look like it's played like modern collectible card games like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, it is in fact played very much like a turn-based JRPG. Because it's Yoko Taro, however, you can guarantee that the stories aren't as straightforward as you might think. A quest to defeat a dragon and the Isle Dragon Roars? Yeah, right. What's great about all of this too is that it is narrated by a different person each game, adding to the tabletop nature of its presentation. This is a turn-based RPG series that you simply shouldn't underestimate, as there's a unique beauty found within its minimalist presentation. It's been a hot minute since Live Alive came out in the West for the first time, but I'm still reeling from that release. Live Alive bended and manipulated the gameplay of turn-based JRPGs in masterful ways that no one else has attempted to copy. Live Alive features an Aliens-inspired chapter, a Street Fighter-inspired tournament, a stealth mission, and a whole host of other styles and genres that all work within the confines of turn-based JRPGs. And it's practically unfathomable to think that all of these work as well as they should. And to think that we almost never got to experience the game that started Takashi Tokita and Yoko Shimomura's careers at Square Enix. Just be mindful that yes, there are still rough edges given that this is a remake of a game released from the 90s, but if you're able to look past that, it gives you a glimpse of how modern RPGs can still innovate in the future. Fancy that. We probably would have never gotten Fantasian Neo Dimension without Final Fantasy XIV's Naoki Yoshida and his budding friendship with the father of Final Fantasy himself, Hironobu Sakaguchi. Fantasian Neo Dimension is the last game Nobuo Uematsu will compose a whole soundtrack for, and once you hear it, you're able to tell that he put all of his heart and soul into this bittersweet final project. What's more is that Sakaguchi leans heavily on his love of dioramas, hiring craftsmen to build gorgeously handcrafted environments that were photographed to serve as the game's backgrounds. Makes you wonder if it was cheaper than making everything in CG. And with this version of Fantasian, we also got voice acting as well. The Dimension system, which lets you bank up to 50 enemies, and its skill system, which lets you bend and twist trajectories to maximize your attacks, are innovative additions that are both subtle yet impactful. In my interview with him, he playfully described Fantasian as an alternate reality Final Fantasy VII. And if you're a turn-based RPG fan and that's gotten you curious, I urge you to play this game right now. Taking a break from Triangle Strategy, the folks over at ArtDink were tasked with creating a remake of a beloved trilogy that felt true to the series' gameplay and presenting it in gorgeous HD 2D. And after quite a bit of waiting, we finally got to experience the first part of this trilogy in Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake. This game was a blast from the past to play, and it was so surreal exploring the same environments in HD 2D while occasionally remembering what's about to happen in the story. What's more is that it is a Dragon Quest veteran's dream, where most of the game's gameplay is left intact without sacrificing what made this game beloved. And with Dragon Quest I and II HD 2D Remake packed in together and coming later this year, it's never been easier to play the entirety of this trilogy and play it in a way that further enhances its classic gameplay. It might be cheating to group together 6 Final Fantasies, but given how most people probably bought them together, it felt right to do so. Final Fantasy 1-6 Pixel Remasters contains 6 classic Final Fantasies and adds tons of quality of life features, remastered pixel art directed by the former artists, with a brand new soundtrack and quality of life features to make these games approachable for modern audiences. These quality of life features should not be underestimated, as it made playing games like Final Fantasy II a much more pleasant experience, considering the weird things we had to do to make it all work. But above all else, these remasters almost feels like a message from Square Enix telling us that they've never forgotten their turn-based roots. And the amount of care and love put into these remasters are just so great that my only big complaint about them is the unfortunate timing of the special collector's edition for the games that sold out in a flash. If anything, that just shows you how much love these games get. And no shade to the games that came after, but I look back fondly at these 6 games constantly, as they paved the way for the many games that became modern favorites. Triangle Strategy isn't a perfect game. Looking back, it probably could have stood to give us more battle variety instead of grinding the same ones over and over to level up. But where it truly excelled for me is how it borrowed elements from classics such as SaGa's Shining Force and Tactics Ogre, and blended those with the individual classes baked into each of Final Fantasy VI's characters. This is a game where composition matters, and you'll get to know each character intimately, not just through their classes and skills, but their stories as well. And while some complained about its story being too much, it was evident to me that only by immersing yourself in the narrative and not trivializing it through min-maxing, that it makes the stakes of your choices feel higher than they should be. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the way you respond to the game's story might be telling of who you are as a person and what's important to you. But to me, Triangle Strategy made me fall in love with tactical RPGs, and I'm hoping that the upcoming sequel, because you know they're working on it, irons out the little issues that I've mentioned here. The SaGa series has never been easy to get into. It can be wacky at times, playing around with skill inheritances and making obtuse design decisions here and there without explaining them properly. So when I heard that the people responsible for the incredible Trials of Mana remake were at the helm of Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven, I had to ask an important question. Is this the breakout hit that the Saga series has been so desperately wanting? The answer was a resounding yes. The ways that this team made Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven the most approachable game in the series is, quite frankly, astounding. It made inheritance in things like the Glimmer system a lot more manageable and understandable to newcomers, with so many proclaiming that it's easily one of 2024's best RPGs, despite it appearing out of nowhere. And the mastery of how this team is always able to carefully and delicately translate the original 2D artwork into a huge expansive 3D world is nothing short of incredible. And that's not even talking about how non-linear it is, and I'm not just talking about how you can go to different places in the world. You affect the story in significant ways, that you might even miss things here and there. And this is all in an awesome roguelite gameplay loop, that's with a T, that preceded this genre by decades. Finally, a Saga game that can be played and loved by all. Is it really a surprise to find Octopath Traveler 2 at the top of this list? I've only sung its praises for years since it was released. Marrying a beautiful and gorgeous HD 2D presentation with a refined and modernized job system makes Octopath Traveler 2 an easy choice for me. And from a personal standpoint, I love that the world of Octopath Traveler 2 is experiencing an industrial revolution of sorts, which reminds me of the steampunk stylings of Final Fantasy VI, which actually served as a huge inspiration for the style of the entire series. And it shows. Not to mention the many ways the game tries to tie in everyone's journeys together to address some of the chief complaints of the first game, as well as the extensive lore and storytelling that you obtain when using the game's path actions, and you've got hours and hours of content to consume beyond the main story. And how it masterfully ties in everyone's journeys together to reveal a bad guy so evil that it serves as the perfect foil for the cast of 8, and you've got a game that's got all the makings of a modern classic. And those, my dear friends, are my top 10 Square Enix turn-based games and series released these past 5 years that I absolutely love. For the folks who have played these games, I'd like to see how you'd rank each game and why. And for those who have never even heard of many of these, tell us which games interest you based on what you heard. Post your thoughts in the comments below and let's talk about it. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.